Mahatma Gandhi. Truth and Satyagraha. Gandhi dedicated his life to discovering and pursuing truth, or Satya, and called his movement Satyagraha, which means appeal to, insistence on, or reliance on the truth. The first formulation of the Satyagraha as a political movement and principle occurred in 1920, which he tabled as Resolution on Non-Cooperation in September that year before a session of the Indian Congress. It was the Satyagraha formulation and step, states Dennis Dalton, that deeply resonated with beliefs and culture of his people, embedded him into the popular consciousness, transforming him quickly into Mahatma. Gandhi based Satyagraha on the Vedantic ideal of self-realization, ahimsa, vegetarianism, and universal love. William Borman states that the key to his Satyagraha is rooted in the Hindu Upanishadic texts. According to Indira Carr, Gandhi's ideas on ahimsa and Satyagraha were founded on the philosophical foundations of Advaita Vedanta. Bruce Watson states that some of these ideas are found not only in traditions within Hinduism, but also in Jainism or Buddhism, particularly those about non-violence, vegetarianism and universal love, but Gandhi's synthesis was to politicize these ideas. Gandhi's concept of Satya as a civil movement, states Glyn Richards, are best understood in the context of the Hindu terminology of Dharma and Ṛta. Gandhi stated that the most important battle to fight was overcoming his own demons, fears, and insecurities. Gandhi summarized his beliefs first when he said, "God is truth." He would later change this statement to, "Truth is God." Thus, Satya in Gandhi's philosophy is God. Gandhi, states Richards, described the term God not as a separate power, but as the being of the Advaita Vedanta tradition, a non-dual universal that pervades in all things, in each person and all life. According to Nicholas Gear, this to Gandhi meant the unity of God and humans, that all beings have the same one soul and therefore equality, that Atman exists and is same as everything in the universe. Ahimsa is the very nature of this Atman. The essence of Satyagraha is soul force as a political means, refusing to use brute force against the oppressor, seeking to eliminate antagonisms between the oppressor and the oppressed, aiming to transform or purify the oppressor. It is not an action but determined passive resistance and non-cooperation where, states Arthur Herman, love conquers hate. A euphemism sometimes used for Satyagraha is that it is a silent force or a soul force. It arms the individual with moral power rather than physical power. Satyagraha is also termed a universal force, as it essentially makes no distinction between kinsmen and strangers, young and old, man and woman, friend and foe. Gandhi wrote, "There must be no impatience, no barbarity, no insolence, no undue pressure. If we want to cultivate a true spirit of democracy, we cannot afford to be intolerant. Intolerance betrays want of faith in one's cause." Civil disobedience and non-cooperation as practiced under Satyagraha are based on the law of suffering, a doctrine that the endurance of suffering is a means to an end. This end usually implies a moral upliftment or progress of an individual or society. Therefore, non-cooperation in Satyagraha is in fact a means to secure the cooperation of the opponent consistently with truth and justice. While Gandhi's idea of Satyagraha as a political means attracted a widespread following among Indians, the support was not universal. For example, Muslim leaders such as Jinnah opposed the Satyagraha idea, accused Gandhi to be reviving Hinduism through political activism, and began effort to counter Gandhi with Muslim nationalism and a demand for Muslim homeland. The untouchability leader Ambedkar, in June 1945, after his decision to convert to Buddhism and a key architect of the constitution of modern India, dismissed Gandhi's ideas as loved by blind Hindu devotees, primitive, influenced by spurious brew of Tolstoy and Ruskin, and there is always some simpleton to preach them. Winston Churchill caricatured Gandhi as a cunning huckster, seeking selfish gain, an aspiring dictator, and an atavistic spokesman of a pagan Hinduism. Churchill stated that the civil disobedience movement spectacle of Gandhi only increased the danger to which white people there, British India, are exposed. Nonviolence. Although Gandhi was not the originator of the principle of nonviolence, he was the first to apply it in the political field on a large scale. The concept of nonviolence has a long history in Indian religious thought, with it being considered the highest dharma, a precept to be observed towards all living beings, at all times, in all respects, in action, words and thought. Gandhi explains his philosophy and ideas about ahimsa as a political means in his autobiography The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Gandhi was criticized for refusing to protest the hanging of Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Udham Singh and Rajguru. He was accused of accepting a deal with the king's representative Irwin that released civil disobedience leaders from prison and accepted the death sentence against the highly popular revolutionary Bhagat Singh, who at his trial had replied, "Revolution is the inalienable right of mankind." Gandhi's views came under heavy criticism in Britain when it was under attack from Nazi Germany and later when the Holocaust was revealed. He told the British people in 1940, "I would like you to lay down the arms you have as being useless for saving you or humanity. You will invite Herr Hitler and Senior Mussolini to take what they want of the countries you call your possessions. If these gentlemen choose to occupy your homes, you will vacate them. If they do not give you free passage out, you will allow yourselves, man, woman, and child, to be slaughtered, but you will refuse to owe allegiance to them." George Orwell remarked that Gandhi's methods confronted an old-fashioned and rather shaky despotism which treated him in a fairly chivalrous way, not a totalitarian power, where political opponents simply disappear. In a post-war interview in 1946, he said, "Hitler killed 5 million Jews. It is the greatest crime of our time. But the Jews should have offered themselves to the butcher's knife. They should have thrown themselves into the sea from cliffs. It would have aroused the world and the people of Germany. As it is, they succumbed anyway in their millions." Gandhi believed this act of collective suicide in response to the Holocaust would have been heroism. On inter-religious relations. Buddhists, Jains and Sikhs. Gandhi believed that Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism were traditions of Hinduism with a shared history, rites and ideas. At other times, he acknowledged that he knew little about Buddhism other than his reading of Edwin Arnold's book on it. Based on that book, he considered Buddhism to be a reform movement and the Buddha to be a Hindu. He stated he knew Jainism much more, and he credited Jains to have profoundly influenced him. Sikhism, to Gandhi, was an integral part of Hinduism, in the form of another reform movement. Sikh and Buddhist leaders disagreed with Gandhi, a disagreement Gandhi respected as a difference of opinion. Muslims. Gandhi had generally positive and empathetic views of Islam, and he extensively studied the Quran. He viewed Islam as a faith that proactively promoted peace and felt that non-violence had a predominant place in the Quran. He also read the Islamic prophet Muhammad's biography and argued that it was not the sword that won a place for Islam in those days in the scheme of life. It was the rigid simplicity, the utter self-effacement of the Prophet, the scrupulous regard for pledges, his intense devotion to his friends and followers, his intrepidity, his fearlessness, his absolute trust in God and in his own mission. Gandhi had a large Indian Muslim following, who he encouraged to join him in a mutual non-violent jihad against the social oppression of their time. Prominent Muslim allies in his non-violent resistance movement included Maulana Abul Kalam Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan. However, Gandhi's empathy towards Islam and his eager willingness to valorize peaceful Muslim social activists was viewed by many Hindus as an appeasement of Muslims and later became a leading cause for his assassination at the hands of intolerant Hindu extremists. While Gandhi expressed mostly positive views of Islam, he did occasionally criticize Muslims. He stated in 1925 that he did not criticize the teachings of the Quran, but he did criticize the interpreters of the Quran. Gandhi believed that numerous interpreters have interpreted it to fit their preconceived notions. He believed Muslims should welcome criticism of the Quran because every true scripture only gains from criticism. Gandhi criticized Muslims who betray intolerance of criticism by a non-Muslim of anything related to Islam, such as the penalty of stoning to death under Islamic law. To Gandhi, Islam has nothing to fear from criticism even if it be unreasonable. He also believed there were material contradictions between Hinduism and Islam, and he criticized Muslims along with communists that were quick to resort to violence. One of the strategies Gandhi adopted was to work with Muslim leaders of pre-partition India to oppose the British imperialism in and outside the Indian subcontinent. After the World War I, in 1919-22, he won Muslim leadership support of Ali brothers by backing the Khilafat movement in favor of the Islamic Caliph and his historic Ottoman Caliphate, and opposing the secular Islam supporting Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. By 1924, Ataturk had ended the Caliphate, the Khilafat movement was over, and Muslim support for Gandhi had largely evaporated. In 1925, Gandhi gave another reason to why he got involved in the Khilafat movement and the Middle East affairs between Britain and the Ottoman Empire. Gandhi explained to his co-religionists that he sympathized and campaigned for the Islamic cause, not because he cared for the Sultan, but because I wanted to enlist the Muslims' sympathy in the matter of cow protection. According to the historian M. Naeem Qureshi, like the then Indian Muslim leaders who had combined religion and politics, Gandhi too imported his religion into his political strategy during the Khilafat movement. In the 1940s, Gandhi pooled ideas with some Muslim leaders who sought religious harmony like him, and opposed the proposed partition of British India into India and Pakistan. For example, his close friend Badshah Khan suggested that they should work towards opening Hindu temples for Muslim prayers and Islamic mosques for Hindu prayers to bring the two religious groups closer. Gandhi accepted this and began having Muslim prayers read in Hindu temples to play his part, but was unable to get Hindu prayers read in mosques. The Hindu nationalist groups objected and began confronting Gandhi for this one-sided practice by shouting and demonstrating inside the Hindu temples in the last years of his life.